Hello, and welcome to Seriously Pointless Conversations About Culture, the podcast where myself and a few of my friends get together and discuss nerdy things. Just a reminder, if you like what you're listening to, please subscribe to Seriously Pointless Conversations YouTube channel, or you can find us on your favorite podcasting apps. Thank you for your support. Without you, none of this would be possible. Thanks for coming by. Now let's get into the episode. Hi, and welcome to Seriously Pointless Conversations About Culture, your seriously pointless podcast about all your nerdy and geek information that you could ever possibly want that's usually from the 90s or earlier, seeing as we're older. But anyways, I'm your host, David, and today I'm actually joined by a special guest, somebody that has been with me pretty much my entire life. So it's actually my big sister, Rachael. How you doing?
Hi, good.
Good, yeah. So if you guys don't know, she's my older sister. If you guys are familiar with our family, and she's pretty much had all the same shared experiences I have had when we were kids, so you're going to see a lot of similarities, just us talking about things, but obviously we're different people, so hopefully you get some different insights from the things that we enjoyed primarily in our youth, which today we're actually talking about the Dark Crystal.
Yes.
So that's one of the things we both really enjoyed. I know, I don't know how you guys have ever, if anybody's ever really seen the Dark Crystal, it's just one of those amazing films that either really scarred you as a child or it just like filled you with awe and wonder, or maybe a little bit of both. I don't know how it was with you.
Yeah.
So
it made you captured with Jim Henson, that's for sure. Anything that he made.
Oh my God, yeah. So we got really lucky because our mom was really big about sending us to the library and things. Mm-hmm. I think it's where we first picked it up, actually.
Probably.
So, but yeah, before we get into all that though, we kind of, like I said, we're going to keep kind of moving with the segment like we kind of started a couple episodes ago about like what we've been up to and how we're doing. Right about this time, this episode aired, it's probably the first part of December. But we're recording this probably early to mid November, so we're all kind of gearing up for the whole Thanksgiving season and just kind of taking it easy. But what have you been up to?
Well, so I started getting into audibles. Have you ever done any of those?
Oh,
okay,
my
so
goodness.
I got sucked in by listening to a book about raising Catholic boys, and that was a good book to get started with in it. But I found other ones. I'm onto The Sandman.
Oh yeah, so
have you heard of it?
No, yeah. So
yes.
So I have all of his. I have all of the graphic novels.
Yes.
By Neil Gaiman.
Yes.
And so they did this one, and it's got who is it? James McAvoy does the narration. It's amazing. I've listened to it all.
I can't listen to it with the boys.
No.
I will drop Paul off at school, and on the way back, we sometimes Ruth and I take a long way home, so I can listen to it in the car.
There you
go. That's pretty much the only way I can read, quote unquote, a book.
Yeah.
Nowadays.
Well, nowadays it's just impossible. Especially I know how I was to begin with. Like just to sit down. Like I'll try to watch Jackie sit down with Louis running around, and she tries to read it. And he'll just hop up on the chair with her, and he'll be like hand her his book, and he's like, read book, and you're just like,
which is still good.
I don't want to read Spot Goes to School for the 800th time. I want to read. I want to read my Robert Galbraith book about Cormoran Strike, and it's just which is
exactly
that's what she does. But that's awesome though.
Yeah.
I had no idea you were into that. So that's a great one to kind of dig your teeth into.
His other one, I can't even remember the title. It's been probably 10 years since I read it. Mm-hmm. But the one, American Gods, which is now a miniseries, I want to say. Yeah, I haven't gotten to see the miniseries. It's probably anything as good as the book.
Not as good as the book, though.
But the book was amazing.
It is But
it's been 10 years.
He's done several other ones on that series. So he did like Anansi Boys, which is because Anansi is in that series.
All the boys love stories about him.
But he's so much
darker.
He's darker, really
typical.
Really dark in that series, which is great though. But yeah, that's awesome that you really get into that to the Sandman. But yeah, how far are you into it right now?
Oh my gosh, it's like I'd have to look it up. I don't know, at least 4 hours.
Okay, yeah, because I think it's a total of about 8.
It's a massive book, and that's the reason I picked it.
Well, they cut out a lot.
Yeah. I actually only have about an hour left.
Okay, so I thought it was a lot longer than that, man.
But
so so you're almost to the end. So they've already gotten into like the Corinthian.
Oh yeah, Oh yeah, we just got done with the Corinthian.
Ooh, he's so.
I'm on the facade right now.
Oh, the facade. The facade is really weird too.
Yes.
That's like I said, they took bits and pieces out of the whole series and they kind of like put it together. If you ever get bored and you actually get time and you want to read it, I have all of the graphic novels and they do. I mean, he does because he did. I think it was a total of 60 issues. Mm-hmm. And I think I let James started to read a couple of them and he's got them possibly, but I'd have to look again. But it's so good. They really do a lot more with the Titania and the fairies and the Shakespeare stuff.
Yes.
It's so good.
I know. One
of my favorite ones of all time. But yeah, I'm gushing a little more. We gotta get back in there a little bit because like I said, it's okay to go tangents, but James has been my my guiding light because I am really bad. You know how bad I am about like going on tangents and things like that. But but kind of going off that with other kind of properties because they were talking about making that into a movie at one point.
I don't know how they would be able to.
A lot of CGI probably. So they
but
had.
There's so much material though.
So that's the thing is I don't know if they would just really focus on the main story.
Yeah.
And not do, or they might do a mini series out of it, which would be, I think it would be a lot better. So I think they're doing this just to see how people react to it, to see if they like it or not. Yeah. And they might make it a mini series, but I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt was actually attached to it at one point. What? I know, Robin himself. So from Batman, I would have been great. I would have paid money so quickly to watch that. But anyways, so. Enough gushing. We got to get into the episode because we've already been talking for like 15 minutes. So anyways, but yeah, if you guys have not read or listened to the Sandman series, check it out, guys. Go to your nearest comic store or get on audible.com and check it out or anything like that. Also, just FYI, if you guys hear any little noises, little squeaks or like that, we've got a little one with us right now, and she's only not even a month old yet, so she's nuzzling in and just trying to take it easy, sleeping, taking it.
She might have some comments for us later.
Well, everyone's got an opinion, especially with the Weidenbenners. But anyways, talking about that opinions. So let's get into some of our childhood, I guess, memories a little bit. Mm-hmm. So, like we were saying earlier, the Dark Crystal movie, we primarily, from what I remember, we got it from the library, I believe. Yeah. I don't know if we've saw any other ones, but I remember vividly getting that one from the library and popping in the VHS. If you guys are older like we are, VHSs were all the rage back in the days. And if you ever wanted to see somebody try to bootleg something, that's what our dad was all about. So he had those double VHSs, and just like I remember I think he recorded it one time because we rented it so much from the library. Yep. But I don't remember. I know he did it with like cassettes and things like that, but
yes,
definitely because I remember there was mixtapes with Johnny Cash and all kinds of things on them.
Yes, well, those were recorded from
records.
Records.
Yeah, which I actually have that record player still. Which the kid. I probably have to pass along to Lewis at some point, so because he likes it a lot. He plays with it a lot more than I do. But speaking of that, so. Just get into that memory section a little bit. So just a little bit about the movie. What do you remember about it? I know we know it's a Jim Henson movie. So what do you remember about it?
I remember it just being completely original. Like it was. Yes, it's a hero and a heroine, and you have these bad guys, and they're trying to correct the wrong in the world. But it was the way they were doing it. Was so original, I think, at our age.
Oh, absolutely.
We were used to...
And they weren't really either, they weren't really bad guys. They were they were one side of a coin, really. So.
Exactly. But you could see the kind of the humanity in each of the sides. And absolutely. I think that was interesting for us at our age when society's throwing you, these are bad guys. They need to be defeated.
It's all black and white.
Yeah, very much black and white. And I think I liked it because... It was...
Had shades of gray in there, definitely.
Exactly. And they weren't really defeated. They were merged into... A single real... Being. Not even like a good being, but a real being, know?
Just like somebody that has their good days and their bad days, exactly. Just like everybody else does. So that's what... I think that was kind of one of those things that whenever you get into... some of Jim Henson's other movies, he really kind of tries to focus on that, like making people authentic. And you never notice that, like great movie creators or just great creators and artists in general really try to push that. They try to make that authentic feeling that whenever they have a a main character in their things. Like they say, hey, they're gonna fall a little bit probably, but they hopefully will pick themselves back up.
Yes.
And try to get moving from that. But so just out of curiosity, apparently I had no idea even when we were younger how long this movie had been out already. So it was out. Actually, they released this in '82.
That was before I was born, even. So.
Yeah, so I was like, oh my god. So it was just bizarre to think they'd had this movie out for that long, and it was just most of that. Well, I mean, that's some of the, if you think about it though, a lot of his stuff before he really got into commercial success. It was made during the mid 70s, early 70s, and mid 80s.
Yeah, which is basically like, Sesame Street's coming into its own. That was like the prime time for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, he did a lot of the puppetry on Sesame Street originally. So
yeah,
and he helped kind of garner that before he broke off and made his Jim Henson Studio as opposed to Sesame Street Studio. I think I don't know if Sesame Street is actually part of Jim Henson Studios or not. If it's two separate things.
That's a good question. I have no idea.
That's okay, but anyways, so the film talking about the man himself, it was written, directed, and produced by him, and he was just all up in it, trying to get it squared away, because this man, from what I can tell, he wanted to have his hands, he wanted to be elbows deep in every project he ever had. So it runs for about 90 minutes, which is a pretty average length for most children's movies. I guess you could call it a children's movie. But and it cost around $25 million to make, but of course it was a commercial success, making almost double its money back just in the first year that it was released, and then box office wise, that's not counting like movie sales and home videos and all that stuff. I'm sure merchandising has been insane. So, but do you remember kind of the basic outline of the story? Because I've got it all here.
I know.
And I could literally read it off to you if you really wanted to.
No.
But I know I want to see what you remember about it.
Well, I just remember, so, you have the two main characters. Well, you don't even see both main characters at the beginning,
Yeah, the second one, what is her name?
Kira.
She pops in about halfway through the movie.
Yeah. But he's there at the beginning, and Jen, and you notice that he is just being taken care of.
Yeah.
By his family, and then all of a sudden he has to go on this journey, like he doesn't understand it.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, it's kind of interesting to see how it kind of evolved, because he does start out as a nobody, being sheltered.
Yeah.
And then becomes the hero in the end, which, I don't know, it's kind of, and I like how he had to, it's almost like it brings to mind kind of like a Hobbit kind of
like he's in his sheltered community.
Yes.
He's in his sheltered community, and he really has to. He's being taught all this knowledge, like a child always is.
Mm-hmm.
You're in their sheltered community, and you're raised and you're taught things, and you have a purpose that you may not even know about yet. Mm-hmm. Because in the end, we all have a purpose, but we just don't know what. Oh, is that right, Ruth? Yeah, you have a purpose too, don't you? And eventually they basically tell him that, it's your time to kind of go out on your own.
Yep.
And do you remember what so that family that he's being sheltered by, are called the Mystics?
Yes.
They were called something else, I believe they were, but I just always remember calling them the Mystics.
Yes. That's what I've already. I didn't know there was another one.
They had a technical term or technical name for them. I remember like in the storyboards. If you look at the
credits or something, yeah.
But I always just called it like the head mystic and all the other little mystics. Yeah. So it was just kind of one of those interesting. But if you notice on the Mystics, none of them are really different. Like none of them really stand out.
No.
Not like the other bad guys. Yeah.
They're very flamboyant in how they want to be their own
very individualistic.
Yes, and they want to stand out and be the most important.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's all their thing is. So.
That was kind of an interesting topic. So, like, you have these two sides, which these all came from the whole premise of how these two races came about was that long ago on this planet, which they call Thra, the crystal of truth shatters, and then these two races appear. So you don't really know why they're there at the first. you find out later, and if you had read anything before that, if you had read any literature about it beforehand, you might have known, because they actually, we can go into this a little bit more, but they really have come out with some awesome literature and some awesome history and origins from like where the beings come from and why they're
their
there.
Backstory? Yeah, good, like, because you don't really get a lot of that.
No. It's really interesting. All comics, but anything. But anyways, so when the crystal cracks.
And they say cracks or shatters, but it's literally only like
it's a shard.
It's a shard that you could like hold in your hand that comes out of the top.
Yeah.
I'm not sure technically how that would work, but that's my one little
gripe about
the movie. I'm like, it shatters. It should like break into a billion pieces, but no, it's one piece that comes out of the top. Which, whatever.
I mean, it's okay, but it's kind of like, if you think about it, it's almost like a metaphor, almost like something that's supposed to be whole loses a part of itself and becomes tainted. Exactly. So I mean, it's kind of like, if you delve too deep into one specific like bad aspect of yourself, you can lose another part of yourself. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of one of those things. That's a very heavy theme that he kind of throws in there multiple times about reunification and bringing yourself together, kind of thing. So, and he was a little bit of a how do I put this politely? He's very much a hippie.
Yep.
Jim Henson was.
Yep.
But he had a lot of really interesting philosophical kind of like undertones in all of his films. So, and he was never over heavy-handed about it. So, but anyways, so you get in there, and you have these two races that are obviously two sides of the coin. And like, you right off the bat, you figure it out. Like you said, you have the mystics that are in tune with nature. They're very
slow, and like even when they speak, their voices are deep and slow,
and you hear every word they say.
Yeah, and everything they do is not like I said, the opposite. So it's not flamboyant. It's very slow and methodical, and has a purpose.
Yeah.
know?
And they never expend more energy than they have to, just simply because they want to have that balance there.
Yeah, they don't seem wasteful, very simply.
Yeah.
I mean, they live in these, small dirt, mud caves, kind of in the...
And so I guess it almost kind of says since they're that one part, even though they try to stay in balance, I think they never progress themselves really. Yeah. And it's not like, as opposed with like the Skeksis, you have to where they are so greedy and they're so focused on advancing themselves. Mm-hmm. Not even just like scientifically, I'm talking like just even station wise within their hierarchy. They want to be the best. They want to be in charge. So, and they're always fighting about it. Yes. And so it's these are like two extremes. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's just really interesting to watch them, kind of just because you don't see a lot of them except at the very beginning, or you don't see a lot of the mystics except at the very beginning and at the very end. Yeah. And sporadically through.
But when it's just going through the movie, they're literally just walking in line. Yeah. Because part of this movie is that the mystics and the Skeksis are supposed to be one. So periodically through the movie, one of them will like a Skeksi will die, and when that happens,
do you remember whenever well, that's a good point. So like the very beginning of the movie, his master, he dies.
Yeah, he's like laying on his deathbed, and in that same exact time, you have his kind of
counterpart. They call him the Emperor.
Yeah,
I think that's what he is.
And he is laying on his deathbed.
Yeah.
And they both die at the exact same time because they are supposed to be one being.
Yeah.
So one cannot exist without the other.
Yeah, and they also like die in tremendously different ways.
Yes.
Like you have the Skeksis, he just crumbles and he just like is just dust.
It's nasty looking.
It's really gross, kind of. Even though it's like it's not bloody or disgusting, it's kind of, he just like falls into himself and he crumbles and breaks. And like the master mystic, or the mystic master, I can't remember which one, how you would want to say it, but anyways, Jen's master, the mystic, we'll say that, he just kind of like slowly disappears
and like fades, and there's a light to him.
Yeah. It's very soft and gentle and peaceful almost.
Yeah.
And so it's like you said, it's everything. It doesn't matter how like what they're doing, everything they do is just it's a diametrically opposed, just these two extremes. So it's just really interesting. So obviously, like you said, I said, the Skeksis are in control. So they, being their nature, they take control whenever they split.
Yeah.
And whenever they obviously can get control of the crystal, and they try to basically, essentially try to steal its power for themselves, which is in their nature. And the mystics
stay young and exactly.
Yeah. And whenever that stops working, they actually go on they kind of go on this in the Netflix series a little bit. They do a genocide of the Gelflings, which is the race that Jen and Kira are.
Yeah.
And they find out, like, oh, if we steal these...
And they call it their essence.
Their essence.
Yes, the creepy voice.
Their essence. But yeah, they do that, and it's just because they're all about trying to stay young forever, but they end up... It's like any resource. I mean, I hate to say that, but they just over harvest it.
Yeah.
And then eventually they're just all the Gelflings are gone.
Yes. And then they move on to
other
another
creature,
species. Yes.
The podlings and all this other thing, but that never seems to work as well.
Yeah.
And I guess it's kind of a thing in there that I guess the Gelflings are supposed to be like the predominant race on this planet.
Yes.
And I guess,
or like the most intelligent, like, the humans.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And they're very much in tune with the crystal, which is part of, like, basically, I should call it the heart of the planet almost.
Yes.
So after that, after their genocide, there's only really one Gelfling that you know of, which is Jen, and he ends up getting raised by the Mystics, obviously. And whenever...
And I love how Jen doesn't really know any of the backstory of his people. Like, the Mystics never tell him, oh, by the way, your entire race was decimated by our other halves. Surprise! It's just, he's kind of kept in the dark until his journey. I
mean, they're kind of like, yeah, it happened, so we're not going to really, like, dwell on it, but this is what your purpose is. And I'm like, okay, I mean, that's...
Which is good for us, because we, because he's a storyteller, so you don't tell the whole story at the very beginning and then just throw a bunch of animated stuff at the end or action stuff at the end. So it is good as a story.
All he's told is whenever his master is dying is that he has to go and meet up with Augra,
who is a character in herself.
Oh my God, she's amazing. So he has to go meet her to find the crystal that will heal. The shard that will heal the crystal by the day of the Great Conjunction is what they call it.
So he has a deadline.
Yeah, absolutely. So they press upon that a little bit, and they're like, "Hey, we got to do this, get going." So he takes off, and he ends up meeting Augra, who is like this. I guess you would call her an old, like, she's basically like the old witchy hag.
Biddy is what I would say.
Old Biddy almost,
Yes.
yeah. She's kind of like, but according to this, she was actually. I don't know if she was part of a race of creatures over there, or she's the only one that there is, and she's just, like, immortal. They go into this a little bit more in depth in some of the other comics, and I haven't gotten a chance to read it all, but from what I've read, she's like an extremely long-lived race of beings that have very small numbers.
I could see that.
And so that's why, but if you notice, like, she is kind of like... very fascinated with mysticism.
Yes.
And the stars.
Astrology, yeah.
Very much so.
Like, she has the solar or their solar system.
Yeah.
It's massive. It takes up the whole room basically in that big chamber that she has in her house.
Yeah, in her chamber there, yeah.
It's so cool. That's my favorite part of the movie, actually.
Yeah, just watching all this, you're like, and that's the thing is they built all these, we're going to get into that a little bit more, but they built all these sets by hand.
Yeah.
And none of it is done. It's all stage work.
Yeah, no CGI. It's gorgeous.
If they could do this with a movie nowadays, it would be so expensive. It's they did it with the series, and it was they did kind of like put in some CGI to help with some stuff, but because it's so much cheaper. But it was still really good to see it anyways. I get off my tangent a little bit. So after he goes there, he finds Augra, and she basically tells him to try to pick a shard. And he ends up finding the shard. And
she has like 7 or 8 laying out.
Something like that.
He just puts his hand over it.
No. He does the.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He plays the his little flute
thing.
Yeah, and it's a frequency or whatever because he remembers that's what he plays the frequency that all the mystics do.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, they do that.
And it's like that. They know that frequency, and he does that note, and it lights up, and it's like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
And so, do you remember what comes and attacks him afterwards?
Yes, those big creepy beetle things.
Yeah, the Gartham. Gartham. Oh, they're so good. So these are called they're crystal creatures a little bit. So
they're basically mind controlled by the Skeksis, and they're what, bullies, I guess you could say.
Kind of they're basically they're foot
Muscle,
soldiers.
yeah.
Foot soldiers. Yeah. So if you watch in the TV series that they came out with, they kind of do a little bit of an origin story for the Gartham a little bit, and it's really cool. It's interesting, but they're kind of like a spider race almost. That's what they kind of make them out to be, and then but the Skeksis kind of lie to them and get them to attack the Gelflings. It's really interesting, but that's kind of where they come from. But that's a little side tangent. But so whenever obviously the Gartham attack. And Jen takes off, falls down the hill, falls down the hill, and then he ends up meeting his best friend, aka also I guess you call his love interest, maybe.
I guess so, yeah.
I don't know. We'll put it this way. We'll say his partner in crime.
There you go.
His the person that will get him to where he needs to be. Kira.
She's a boss lady.
Yeah, she's definitely in charge, and she gets him to do things because he kind of is gets all mad and kind of gets a little whiny.
The relationship is very much he's the sheltered country boy. She's the girl who's been living on the streets and raised herself and has probably been in a few knife fights.
Probably. I would be down with that, yeah. That's a good description of her, but she's got her little trusty companion, Fuzzball.
Which we still need to, at some point, either of us needs to get some small hairy little dog that yips all the time, and we will name it Fizzgig. You do realize this.
That's right. I was telling Jackie, I was just like, if we get a dog, it's going to be called Fizzgig. And she's like, that's an awful name. And I go,
no, it's the best.
It says you. I was just like,
I feel like a dog would have to earn that name.
Oh, yeah. If he's just rah, 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 just constantly just making
noise,
I'm like, oh, you're a Fizzgig.
Also a big pansy too, we'll run away at the littlest at the vacuum cleaner or something. He was the best, because I love how at the very beginning he just comes out teeth ablaze and you think he's this big mean animal, and then she's like Fizzgig, togo la batara, and he's just and I'm just like, what is this? I was like, you're a big softy is what he is. And then she's all gentle with him, and she's jumps on Jen's case, and it's like, you are a nice person, but
you kind of you don't take no crap. That's what she is. That's why I love her. So, but she ends up whenever she's helping Jen get out of the mud a little bit, which is where because he falls in the mud after Fizzgig scares him.
Which I guess we never really said why they got attacked in the first place. Remember?
Who?
So back at Agra's house, they get attacked because the Skeksis realize Jen is alive. Up until that point, that was the whole reason that Jen is being chased throughout the whole movie, because all of a sudden the Skeksis realize that there is one of Jen's kind.
Because I remember the crystal calls to the Skeksis, and they're like, the crystal calls, and they it shows them in the crystal, and they're like, a gelfling.
Oh my gosh, you do the voices just right.
Gelfling. Sorry, I love those. So anyways, go ahead.
But so they get attacked because the Skeksis are all of a sudden, notified that, or they find out that there's another Gelfling living. So that's when Jen has to go on his journey, because he gets attacked by, the beetle things.
The beetle thing, Gartham, it's all good. So it's no big deal.
So anyway, but so then he finally meets up with Jen, or Jen meets up with Kira. And then they finally realize, are we the same thing? And it's I love their journey.
Because he's never met anyone else like him before.
And I think that he's never questioned that either. He just kind of goes with his life. He's not a questioner.
No, which is
interesting.
Well, I mean, because it's a different personality. It's always, but he's Kira. She's always asking questions. Mm-hmm. Just constantly. But Jen is just this is what I have to do. This is what I have to do. I'm just I mean, that's interesting because in a lot of things, that's how people are, though. Mm-hmm. Some people, you have questioners and you have doers, and mm-hmm. it's like, that's okay. You know, that's how a lot of people are, and luckily you have to have those different facets of people to try to get things done. So, and that's just what is really interesting. But she starts to question a little bit, like, you know, who is he? Like, what is he? And they have a little bit of that answered. So, like, whenever she reaches out and like grabs his hand,
was it dream fasting?
Dream fasting, yes, is what they called. So yeah. And so they really kind of delve into this into the TV series a little bit too, but they basically share each other's memories is what they do.
And it goes back to like when they're both babies.
They're
very young.
Yeah, and he doesn't remember, and these were things he probably didn't remember whenever he was a baby, like whenever the Skeksis attacked.
Yeah.
And whenever the same thing for her, and how like the Mystics took him in, and how the Podlings end up finding her, mm-hmm. and they all get raised by their separate people.
Yeah.
But they're still loved and cared for, and it's just really interesting. So, and then they kind of just like slowly fade back into reality again.
Yeah, and then she has to explain to him what happened because he is obviously clueless.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Yeah, it's him because he's never been taught that, so.
Exactly.
So she ends up actually, digging him up out of the mud, and...
Don't they go back to like her family?
Yeah, the Podling.
Yes, okay.
Which he learns, like, he's just like, they go, and these are people who are, I love Podlings to death because they're just like, they seem like they're just like little partiers.
Oh my gosh, big old eyes, like they are going to be up all night.
They're hanging. They drink to like midnight and they fall asleep for a couple hours, get up and start doing the work all over again. They just do it every single day, and I'm like, these guys live life to the fullest, and that's why I love watching them. But
they are attacked again.
Yeah, they get attacked again but it's for a different reason. So they actually didn't know where Jen had gone. Oh, I know, it's probably said.
She's dreaming.
And I could hear her. But they don't know where Jen had went, but they actually had they went into the Skeksis had sent the Gartham in to capture Podlings.
Yeah, to harvest them basically.
Basically, yeah. And so I think whenever this happens, Kira and Jen don't get captured, but
they follow along because she wants to rescue.
Yeah, because some of her family got taken. And I was like, I get that, And so they follow them, and on the way back to the castle, the Skeksis castle, they actually find some ruins.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things that's the one of the biggest reveals essentially about like how
Jen needs to fix all this.
How to fix them, because he just knows, he's like, what do I do with it? I have the shard. What do I do with it?
Yes.
And you're just like, dude, it's simple. Shard goes in crystal.
I've seen this from the beginning. Come on, it's easy.
Where have you been all this time? And you're talking to yourself as your kid. You're like as a kid, and you're just like, is he this dumb? And you're like, obviously he has no idea like that the crystal has a hole in it.
Yes.
Which is where the shard could go.
Yep.
But anyways, he sees this. And he sees the mural, and then they finally read it, and it has that very specific prophecy that he puts on there. When single shines the triple sun, what was sundered and undone shall be whole, and the two by Gelfling hand, or else by none.
Yeah, and I think they think through the whole time that the two made one is literally just the crystal. Like they don't understand that it's actually the two beings, the Mystics and the Skeksis, that are the thing that needs to be made whole.
Absolutely.
Which we don't really until the very end anyway.
No, we don't, because you're just thinking like, why do they need to be two? Like, what kind of ugly monstrosity is this thing going to be? Like whenever it becomes two, but well, you're waking up a little bit, aren't you?
I think she might. I don't know. She'll probably fall asleep here again.
Sorry, we're getting distracted, guys. So obviously they go through this through these ruins, and they find that it's an underground entrance to the castle, this is kind of where they get attacked by Chamberlain, he's actually kind of like an outcast.
Yeah, well, he gets kicked out because at the beginning when the Emperor Skeksis dies, the only way that they can be quote unquote become the next emperor is
trial by stone.
Trial by and they either basically say I'm in charge and no one challenges them. But if they say I'm in charge and someone challenges them, then they have to do this trial by stone or whatever.
They pick whatever they want, whatever trial they want, but they chose trial by stone.
But they basically take these swords and hit it against this big stone until it breaks.
Yeah,
is what happens here.
It's basically like two bulls beating, like running into each other. Essentially, it's just like, my muscles are bigger.
Yeah. Well, Chamberlain loses, and he's basically stripped of all his finery and kicked out.
Yeah.
Which, when you see, I think that scene in the movie is kind of interesting, because when he is stripped of all his finery that he's gathered, he's just like this creepy, skinny, like emaciated lizard bird creature.
Yeah,
like there is no substance to him.
Yeah, it's all an act. It's all just
a mask.
A mask.
Yes.
And that's what kind of like really kind of hits it home, that these guys are very hollow, empty things.
Yes.
And it's just kind of, it's interesting. So
yeah. Anyway.
But
so Chamberlain attacks them when they creep into the castle,
and kind of going back to that, that they're the two species are connected. They scratch him. You remember, like, he grabs him,
I forgot about that.
And his hand gets cut, and they're like walking, and then one mystic looks over at his staff, and his hand's like, he goes, my hand.
Yeah, and it's bleeding too.
It's bleeding, and he just keeps on going.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that is just bizarre. There we are.
Got Cassie. We're happy now.
Happy person.
For a bit.
Happy baby. So they get into the castle, and they actually separate. Mm-hmm. So Jen is just like, man, you're just not wanting that pacifier at all, are you?
Yeah, it's a fight.
I know.
What were the creatures called that Jen tries to rescue, but right before they go into the castle, those really tall, like
Landstriders?
Yes, and they're like kind of like a rabbit-looking thing, but like also a giraffe.
Yeah, it's like a mix between a giraffe, a rabbit, and like I'm gonna say a gazelle.
Yes, but you know what? Those are my favorite creatures in the whole thing.
They're really.
I don't know why.
She's like,
yes. I don't know why. But then that's also part of the movie where he finds out that she has wings and he doesn't.
Yeah,
and he's like amazed by it.
Yeah, because they attack him. The Gartham actually attack, which is why they fall down to that ruin there, and that's why they find that. So yeah, sorry guys, we're going back and forth a little bit, but that's why we're here, is because we're you help each other remind of things, and I don't catch everything all the time. So, but yeah, I remember that creature. That's the other thing they get into. They have so many random, like, crazy looking creatures in this film. So,
but that's a Jim Henson thing too, though.
Oh, absolutely. He didn't want to have anything that was recognizable, other than like, hey, this thing has hands and feet and a face.
Yes, and it eats. You know,
it's just like, but he said he wanted to make things unique looking, which is he always did that. So,
yes.
So once he goes into the once they go, speaking of random weird creatures, they separate, and Jen goes towards the crystal chamber, and Kira actually goes into the I guess you would call it the dungeons.
Yes.
Because it's the Skeksis scientists.
But it is kind of dungeon because they're all in cages.
Yeah, and there's like all these
different animals.
Different animals that are in there, and she actually kind of like, while she's trying to save her friends and the creatures, just doing her thing.
Speaking of creatures.
I know. She says, "Yeah, I'm not a creature," but she actually gets captured by the scientists, and they actually try and use the crystal to try and
drain her of her essence.
Yeah, yes. And she like calls out to him, and I remember the creatures actually end up attacking the scientist, and he's the last Skeksis to die.
Yes. In the movie, die
in the movie. Yeah.
But when they drain or they try to drain everybody of their essence, like the Podlings and Kira, it's always through the eyes. Did you notice that? Like, there's no needles. There's no
eyes are the windows.
Right. I thought that was kind of cool too. Like, it wasn't bloody. It wasn't goring. It was just. They were taking almost like their soul out. You know.
Yeah, essence. Like, it's a different word for soul. He uses the word essence.
Essence. Yeah. Yes, and then. So the Podlings, if you notice in the movie, they are, after their essence is drained, their faces become super hollow. You know,
they lose all the color in their skin.
Their
and their
eyes,
hair are just like vacant.
Yes, they basically become like these zombies, and they are the servants for the Skeksis in the castle. So, which I find interesting, because if the Podlings can survive after their essence is drained, why did the Gelflings not survive? Because they would still be there. You know. Anyway.
Well, that's one of those things. Like, I know they don't hit on that in the story or in the movie, but I think
But maybe the Gelflings just can't survive without their
or
quote
maybe
unquote
they
soul.
just drain them so much that they just end up dying.
That's probably part
That's always
of
a
it.
possibility too, and maybe it's because of that prophecy though too, that whenever that came out, that they just were like, we're just gonna kill the Gelflings anyways just to be safe about it.
That's true.
So that's always a possibility too. But so
Anyway.
she ends up killing the scientist Skeksis. He falls into the lava pit below.
Yeah.
The burning pit, and then
Very 1980s.
yeah, it happens. It wasn't very well done, but it's still amazing to watch. So he dies. Kira gets released by her animal friends, and at the very just before the Great Conjunction is about to happen, he gets into the crystal chamber, and all the Skeksis are there because they're just saying they're gathering because they're we will be rulers of all once the Great Conjunction is over with, and that's when Jen appears, jumps on the crystal, bam, and you have the giant light that pops out, and
but not before Kira gets stabbed by Chamberlain, right?
That's right.
Because
he jumps on the crystal, he drops the crystal, and he's like, how do I get it? And she showed up and got it for him. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and throws it back up to him, and then Chamberlain stabs her, the Emperor or somebody, I can't remember who it is, but stabs her, and she's dying, and he has to put the crystal shard back in there, and
he actually and that it's right at that time then the mystics show up, and then
they all line up behind their counterparts or their opposite, and then now the mystics I find interesting because they walk.
They're always hunched over and low to the ground.
Don't they have
But they're long. They have two sets of arms.
Yeah, two sets of arms.
Yeah.
So they basically kind of walk on four of them. Yeah, right? Kind of, and then they end up standing up at the end of the movie. And so they're as tall as the Skeksis. Yeah. And then when the crystal kind of binds them together by pulling them together. Now she's got the hiccups. Binding them together. And so they're at the same height. Yeah. And so the crystal itself, this light kind of pulls them together and they become one again.
Yeah, one being, one race again. So that's... And so that was kind of an interesting thing. So whenever they take, they take a different tact whenever he calls them. So whenever they come together, he actually calls them Skeks.
Yes.
I guess that's apparently I don't know why he calls them this, but I know they can kind of he can delve into it a little bit more later on with some of the other mythology and things like that. But I know they do that. But it's just kind of interesting. But they're almost like beings of pure energy. Mm-hmm.
Because
they look like
when they leave, after they join together and they leave, you see them rising. It's almost like they're being beamed up. On Star Trek or
beam me up, Scotty
kind of thing. They just become like this light that goes up, and then they're gone.
Yeah, and that's what they kind of say that a little bit. They say they kind of go over the stuff. They say in our arrogance we attempted to use the crystal and it cracked. Yeah. And that's why we separated. But now that we know that it was we have to stay away from that kind of thing. Stay away from being arrogant and trying to use this power for our own. Yeah. Because we're just gonna leave. And apparently, it's almost like they weren't a race of the world. They were beings from another world that came there to try and use the crystal. Yeah. Maybe almost.
They brought it with them or something. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, they never really explained that a ton. So it's just
because the crystal doesn't do anything except help them. It doesn't affect the planet at all.
Well, it almost does. Because it's almost like its heart. Because you can see once the crystal is taken care of or fixed, you can tell. I don't know if you watched any of the other.
But do you think that's because of the crystal, or do you think that's because of the Skeksis?
I think it's because of the crystal. So I think the crystal is kind of like the heart. Is like the heart of the world, or part of the world there. And because once it's fixed, and they kind of point on this in a little bit in the TV series a little bit, Age of Resistance. Because whenever they show the castle's still black and scary looking. Yeah. But everywhere around it is still lush and green.
Okay.
A little bit, and it's starting to kind of die and wither a little bit.
Okay.
Around it. And it's kind of starting to become a desolation a little bit, but they even right after the crystal gets made whole again, everything around it, like you see, if you remember that last scene where they pull out, it's like the castle, it's not in that crystal, it's not black anymore.
So it's like this white.
It's a white or a diamond, like clear glass color.
Yeah.
And there's a river by it, and there's like stuff growing.
Yeah,
again.
that's right.
And so that's kind of why I kind of think that a little bit. So, but that's pretty much the plot of the story. I mean, they basically leave the planet.
They heal Kira.
They heal Kira, and all the podlings and everybody basically gets saved and fixed. Essentially, they're like it's kind of like a catcher. They wave that old magic wand and they make everybody better.
Yes.
So. But yeah, that's kind of where the movie ends. We're not going to delve too much more into the mythology and stuff. That could be another episode.
Oh my gosh!
I hope it is, because I'm going to probably needless to say, I've got a bunch of the comic books sitting over back there. I bought them years ago. I just haven't gotten a chance to get around to read them. It's just like everything else around here, but it's just life in general. But anyways, so. Where do you think, I know you kind of got my synopsis over there, my plot story and things like that. You see this amazing story that's set up. Where do you think a lot of his ideas came from, without even looking at it? Just where do you think?
Kind of like I said earlier, I feel like it's a very Hobbit theme. Mm-hmm. So very, you have a hero, has one goal, mm-hmm. and unfortunately he's got to go to like the heart of the evil place in order to fix whatever it is or get rid of the thing that's
toss his ring in,
basically. But I like how it was not so much eliminating the evil, but bringing the evil and the good back in balance, because
absolutely,
I think that's the kind of the point of this story, is that you have to have both sides, because if you don't have both sides, then one of them is gonna just run amok.
No, absolutely. So and that's definitely a very heavy theme that he has in there.
Yeah. So definitely a C.S. Lewis kind of theme.
Yeah, he definitely has it in there. So he really, from what I was reading, that's kind of a lot of part of what he put in there. So he was really heavy into a couple books at the time. He kind of heavily, whenever he did interviews, he really cited these two things. So he said he looked at it was called Jane Roberts' Seth Material, which is a little bit, it's got a lot of philosophical undertones. That's what you throw in there.
Yeah.
But the only difference is that it's a very new agey kind of book.
It is.
Which I don't know if you've ever read or not. I kind of looked at a synopsis of it, and it just like everything in that time frame, because you can tell like Jim Henson is like very much Age of Aquarius hippie kind of guy.
Yeah.
And even whenever he ended up dying because he refused to go to the hospital, that was just a whole other ball of wax that I'm not going to get into. I love him as a creator, but some of his philosophical ideas were a little strange, but it is what it is. So that's why everyone's allowed to have their own beliefs. So, but going off that, he really kind of like wanted to focus on an idea that consciousness creates matter, and that each individual creates his or her own reality through thoughts, beliefs, and expectations. Mm-hmm. And that the point of power through which the individual can affect change is in the present moment. So that was it's not wrong. It's a very, how you react to things in the moment can really affect how things will happen in the future.
True.
And so it's a roundabout way of saying
free will.
Yeah, free will. I mean, it's what it comes down to. Yeah. So, and it's just a really interesting concept that he throws in there, because the whole time, if you look at it, Jen has the option. He doesn't have to go on an adventure.
No, and really he's kind of pulled by the nose by Kira through most of it.
He really is, yeah. But I mean, at the very beginning, he didn't have to go on his venture.
No.
He didn't have to meet Kira.
No.
And he didn't have to go to Agra and find a crystal. It's just like he could have literally just taken off and went and hid somewhere.
Which is probably what he wanted to do.
Yeah, but he was just like, maybe I should do this. where do I need to go? It's just like, and it's kind of part of like growing up a little bit. And it's just one of those really interesting kind of concepts that he throws in there. But other kind of themes that he throws in there. So it was really interesting to read this, though. They actually had done a couple prototypes of Skeksis and kind of the idea of the Land of Thra. So I don't know if you've ever watched any of Jim Henson's older stuff.
Nope.
He does. So it was on SNL.
Yeah. It's
called The Land of Gorch. He kind of predated the Dark Crystal by, I think, 5 or 6 years, maybe.
So it's prototype, basically.
Yeah, so it was basically puppets. It wasn't as elaborate as the other stuff is.
Yeah.
It was definitely like puppets. So it was a king, and like had one main servant, and they kind of threw a couple other ones in, like his wife, and he would have all these problems and all this. It was just basically like a married guy and a wife sitcom. It wasn't very well received when it was on SNL. They only had it on there like for the first season or whatever it was. But they had him on there because it was Jim Henson.
Henson, yeah.
But he really, that's kind of what he kind of based it initially off of, but he kind of evolved it a little bit to make it a little terrifying.
Which I think is interesting for Jim Henson because, the other thing we were raised on was Disney.
Yeah.
Where everything is...
Ha 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 ha.
Yeah, and birds dress you and
birds,
make your clothes.
Little mice spilled me my dress.
Right?
And it's like...
It's not... These people just kind of get given everything.
They don't have to work for it.
There's no fear.
No.
Like you had never... You... As a viewer, you are never afraid.
There's no thought in your mind that says, this character is going to die, possibly.
Yes.
You know for a fact that they're going to make it through everything just fine.
Yes.
And that's kind of, I've never...
But Jim Henson doesn't do that.
No. So, like, this was great. So, this is a really awesome quote by Frank Oz. So, Frank Oz is another one of his big puppeteer guys that was with him his entire career. Yes. So he quoted as saying that Jim Henson believed that it was unhealthy for children to not be afraid.
Which I think is as a teacher, I think that is an excellent point. At some point, you should be disappointed, let down, discouraged. I mean, you should have those experiences at some point in your life. Otherwise, you won't be able to deal with them as an adult.
You can't pick yourself up if you don't fall on your face a couple times.
Exactly.
And you're gonna fall on your face way more than you'll ever complete the task that you want to.
Yep.
And that's a good thing for kids and people to understand. Is because if you don't, that's the problem with a lot of people is if they fall down and they say, "Oh, that was hard." They become a victim, though. That was hard. I don't want to do that anymore. Yeah. Well, guess what? It's hard.
Or it's I don't want to do it anymore. But some people it's somebody else's fault. Yeah. And they become the victim, and that's probably even worse. It's someone else's fault.
It's never anybody else's fault. It's nobody's fault but your own, in my opinion. And because you set your standards, and you are the person that is the one that puts forth the effort. So that's
there can be chance situations.
There's always little things in there, but you can always. I have a strong feeling that you can always overcome the adversities or
just adapt.
Or adapt to it, yeah. Say, it's like if you cannot get what or if you say you're trying to apply for a job and say that job is just super high up there, like if you're just out of college or you're not even out of college, you're out of high school and you want to work on Wall Street or you want to be a CEO of a company. Well, it's probably going to take a little bit to get there. Maybe you got to do a couple side steps. Maybe you got to work at a couple dead end jobs a couple times, but eventually you're going to get there.
Yeah.
That's how life is, unfortunately. But eventually you get to where you need to be. So,
but definitely, I think fear is something that needs to be experienced.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And so, going off that fear a little bit, he actually looked into Jim Henson. Was really into an illustrator, British illustrator by the name of Brian Froud. I'm going to say his name wrong. He has some really funky artwork. Like very much fairy kind of artwork, and it's very. Have you ever seen? You've seen some of like the cover art on the Dark Crystal movie. Yeah. So that is Brian Froud.
Okay.
And so it's very just.
It kind of reminds me of if someone who was doing artwork for a 80s heavy metal band was like, you go draw some children's cover art with fairies in it. What would that look like? That's what it reminds me of almost.
So good, though. So good. I love it. So, like, they really wanted to... that's a whole nother ball of wax there. If we could get into artists, I could tell you... Actually, Richard Corbin is one of my favorite artists. He actually did a lot of covers for Heavy Metal, the magazine back in the day. I love Richard Corbin, but it's just, he's got a lot of really big-chested women in his comics for some reason.
Never.
I know, and I'm just like... I'm like that just doesn't look.
You gotta know your
audience.
That
doesn't look comfortable at all. But whatever.
You gotta know your audience, bud.
I guess. But other than that, I love his. He does a lot of Edgar Allan Poe adaptations, and I love it. So, anyways.
Yep.
Count of Monte, Cask of Montilago, the one where the guy gets
he's
sealed up.
French.
He gets sealed up in the basement downstairs, and he's still alive. Cask of I cannot remember what it's called, but you know what I'm talking about?
I'm wanting to say the Count of Monte Cristo, but that's not it. That's a book.
Yeah, they
yes, I know where he
they drug him and they
throw him in there and then they seal him up. They brick up the wall, but I can't remember what it is.
That's the end of that is the end of the story, and you're just like, this is
BS.
Like, this is an awful story.
But in reality, Edgar Allan Poe was like, yep, time for a drink, and then just forgot about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Man, that's a whole other ball of wax, too. So, anyways, talking about creepy things, they really wanted to try and make these things as lifelike, all the puppetry. But, like, the cheek movements.
Yeah,
so they did, this is one of those first movies that they ever did where... the animatronics on the face were all radio controlled, and this is, I mean, nowadays it's literally they press a button on a computer and it's all CG'd and they make it move. It doesn't look the same.
It doesn't.
It doesn't have the same creepy feel to it, does it?
Like where you can see the shadows move and the skin kind of bubble up in certain, especially on the Skeksis, because their skin is so, it appears to almost be like paper thin. Yeah. Like an old person, you know, and you're just waiting for it to like crack or rip in some place. And so like Chamberlain, I think his face is probably the best out of all the Skeksis.
Because when they move, you see the lines in their face and it like grows taut when they get mad. And I'm just like, I was like, oh, it's so gross.
It is, but it's so lifelike. Like you immediately just become almost disgusted with how they look the first time you see their faces really move. Oh, and I think that's the point,
and
though.
Especially whenever you see, like you were saying earlier, whenever they tear away all of Chamberlain's trappings, and you just see him for what he is,
and you can see his chest and his ribs,
and his big belly, and you're just like, oh, it's so gross.
Yes,
it's so gross. So they really wanted to try to going off that, they really wanted to make these the concept of the Skeksis to be, like you said, that bird, lizard, hybrid kind of thing.
But they almost look like some creature, like a human who is like malnourished. Because like, when you see people or even young children who are malnourished and like
their stomachs are really big,
they're distended.
But they're
everything
sunken,
else.
Everything else
yes.
sunken in.
So they almost look like a malnourished child in a third world country.
Almost, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Maybe that's where they got that concept from a little bit, but
I guess so.
I know, but so they really, and some of these costumes, because I'm just going to call them costumes because these were like they physically had people in these the
Skeksis,
in the Skeksis costumes as well as the Mystic costumes as well. And all these other costumes, like the Gartham had people in that. The Gartham had one
at least two people, right?
No, I think they only had one. I think I go into a little bit later on, but they had to physically hang them up, like people were in there. The suits were so heavy that they had to hook them up and pull them up, like while they're in the suits,
so they could get out.
They could get out and take a breather, because they could only hold these things up for like 45 seconds at a time.
Oh my gosh, I can see that.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, but they really wanted to try to make these things as lifelike as possible, so they melded that costume and puppetry and robotics all into one, and you really have this these simple movements really exaggerated with and really emphasized with all the not computerized movements, the robotic movements and animatronics that they there. But then on top of that, they had all the other little hand puppets, or I'd say hand puppets. The the stick and rod puppets is what they were called. They were called, which is what Jen and Kira are in the Podlings. Like, so what they would do is literally you have the flat surface, like you would have, this is the stage, and then you would have another, like, you would have like a trough essentially where they could, the actors could be standing up. So essentially you have a table that is almost like head high, neck height, or
6 foot higher,
6 foot higher or higher, and you're sitting there playing with something like this, and you just have to try to be just below it, and it's really kind of,
and also kind of watch to see what you're doing at the same time, and looking at the script,
and then on top of it, you're talking, you're speaking, and things like that. And sometimes they didn't have people. They had people doing the two separate things. Like one person would be the puppeteer, and another person
which happens a lot.
Yeah, I mean, because you can't be both, unfortunately. Not everybody's a Big Bird or Elmo kind of character, so. But they really kind of wanted to emphasize this in true Jim Henson fashion. He did not want to get rid of any of the puppetry, and this thing took forever to film, apparently. Yeah. So it was just, you're talking like at least, even with them doing probably like 18 or 20-hour days probably sometimes, just watching them do that. So, but whenever... he wanted to, kind of going back to the Skeksis a little bit, so he wanted to really, and we kind of touched on this a little bit already, but he really wanted to specify, like you said, that each Skeksi was individualistic.
Yes.
You could specifically tell, like, each one of them was, had to really, like, I'm going to get power, and this is what I'm going to do with it. Mm-hmm. And so you have, and they really emphasize this in the TV show, actually. Okay. So you'll have the one where he's like, you have the scientist who's really focused on science. There's a general, and there's actually what really is really cool. You have one where he's called the huntsman. Essentially, he's the hunter.
Okay.
And he's out in the woods. Always never goes to the castle, but he's all about the hunt.
Oh, really?
And it's very bizarre. And he wears his prey and things like that. He actually has a Skeksi skull face mask on because apparently he's killed another Skeksi that got in his way before.
Which is not shocking.
It's just so bizarre, and it's really interesting how they emphasize that a lot, even in the newer stuff. So if you guys haven't seen it,
I will
check
have
it
to
out.
watch this.
I'm
on maternity leave, David. There's a lot of binge watching going on.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I understand completely. Trust me. I had this. My hand was broken for about 9 weeks, and I had way too much time on my hands. So, well, hand. But so he really focuses on this, and even with that going on, he wanted to focus, like I said earlier with the Mystics, that they're really removing themselves from worldly desires. Yeah. And they're really just trying to say, hey, we don't want to take any more than we have to, and they're very much, I would almost say, Native American-ish.
Or commune of some sort.
A commune, like almost. They're very commune, and they don't take more than what they have to, and they want to make sure everything stays in balance, like we were saying.
Very minimalistic.
Very minimalistic. So this is actually, I was telling you about the Mystics. They actually, the costumes were reportedly so heavy that the puppeteers had to be bent into them. Yeah. So the way they were in them, they could only wear them for maybe 30 seconds at a time. Yeah. So they couldn't just, if they were in a pose, it was 30 seconds at a time, and then they had to take it off. Mm-hmm. And so can you imagine how long it would take to film something?
Well, especially when you're filming, something that you as the viewer think is taking forever, but it's only a 1.5-minute clip. They probably took 4 or 5 days to get that 1.5-minute clip done because it was so heavy
or even
they're just learning how to move in it.
It's almost akin to stop motion.
Yeah, that's like claymation. That's kind of what that reminds me of, that this movie and how it is made, because it cuts quite a bit.
And so when you look at something like that and they say that, this is an hour and a half, you're just like, dear Lord. Mm-hmm. I mean, just the time and the effort that it takes and the care that it takes to make this all work and just all sync up. It's just
and
really
back in the 80s too.
It's really interesting to watch. So the other character they were really kind of focusing on too was Aughra. She was actually another one of those puppets that it's an actor that's encased inside of a puppet as well. and they were really trying to go to. This is really interesting. Jim Henson cited it as he wanted her to be seen as kind of an insane bird trying to overcome Tourette's.
That's pretty much the nail on the head right there.
On the head, absolutely. And you just like, you love that idea because she's like, sometimes good, sometimes bad.
And she's grunting every time she has to squat down on the ground. Because she's definitely not ladylike.
No, she's definitely not ladylike. She's definitely a little tomboyish.
Yeah, maybe not so much tomboy as she's 5 bajillion years old. And
Okay, I can see that.
Doesn't give a you-know-what about what anybody thinks anymore.
I could see a big patootie anymore, yeah. I could see that, definitely. I could see that, so... But other things that we're seeing in here, you see the other characters, obviously, like I was saying earlier, like the Gelflings, Fizzgig, the Podlings. These are all hand puppets, essentially, with the stick and rod, and they move them just below the screenshot. So if you guys ever like want to see that, look up a documentary of Making of Dark Crystal. It's textbook. A lot of the stuff that he does in this, he created these textbook.
Yeah, he came up with it. Yeah.
Movements for puppetry and made them. And so if you guys want to get into this stuff at all, seriously, he is and was a master of this kind of stuff, and it's just one of those great joys to watch people learning how to do it from him. So, but so one of the really interesting things I wanted to bring up, so the Gelfling design is actually done by the wife of Brian Froud, who's like I said, the art guy or the concept creator of this. Her name's Wendy Froud. So they weren't actually married. They got married afterwards.
Probably a good idea. That'd be rough working together.
Well, I know, right? So she's actually the person that created the Yoda puppet as well. So she's already worked on 2 huge.
Yeah.
And so. Huge.
She loves pointy ears, apparently.
I guess. I mean, she's all about those elf. But if you've seen a picture of her, she's definitely like, I go to Renaissance fairs on a weekly basis.
Gotcha.
I was just like,
I had a big turkey leg every weekend.
I could have a conversation with her. Probably.
Okay.
So, but she was really but they affectionately call her the mother of Yoda. So
I like that.
I know. And so kind of going in with more of that grand kind of feeling, so. On top of all the puppetry and the imagery that he throws in here, just the musical score,
it's amazing. Like,
so they do. Which one do you remember the most? I mean, other than
I remember the real like light and airy heavy violin. When the 2 are becoming one.
Yeah.
Na, 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 and it's very light and kind of climatic, but ethereal at the same time. Yeah. I mean, you definitely know what's going on with the music.
Absolutely. So the reason they actually had the London Symphony Orchestra and do this. And he was actually conducted by Trevor Jones, who did a lot of work with the Jim Henson films at the time. And whenever they did this, he actually.
So did he also do the Labyrinth too?
Yes.
Okay.
So he was really heavily connected with him, with Jim Henson throughout his entire life. So actually, the guy that composed this, was a little tidbit I thought it was really, really cute and amazing. So it's further down here. He did Labyrinth and Last of the Mohicans. So
Last of the Mohicans is like my favorite movie soundtrack.
Jam.
That's
you're
my
just
jam.
You're like Daniel Day-Lewis.
I love to see shirtless men running in the woods, right? What woman doesn't? Don't lie to yourself. It's there deep down.
Hey, he's no Terry Crews, but it's okay. Anyways, so sorry. Anyway, so one of the really interesting, cute, really awesome tidbits was while they were making this film, Trevor Jones's daughter was born, and he actually names the Landstrider theme after his daughter.
How cute!
It was really kind of a cute thing. It's just like, that's like a kind of thing. It's like, I would do something like that if I was making something, because I was like, my kids.
If I was, a composer for the London Symphony Orchestra, totally. But nope.
No.
I'm not that creative.
I'm just Joe Schmo. So,
right.
But that's kind of the concept design and like a lot of the themes that they had in there. So when I was talking a little bit earlier about the sheer amount of volume that they've put out for it so far, they have done so much in the last 20 or so years for the Dark Crystal mythology. So are you reading it right now, I guess?
Yes.
So they put out tons of comic series. They released, and it's The Power of the Dark Crystals, the one they talk about. And they even have novels that they released, like actual written novels. Shadows of the Dark Crystal, Songs of the Dark Crystal, Tides of the Dark Crystal, Flames of the Dark Crystal. So these are all they released these in anticipation of Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, which is the Netflix series, which I'm so mad they're not renewing because Disney is a bunch of buttholes.
Well, shocking.
Sorry about that. But it's one of those things that's like, I kind of hope that maybe they move it over to the Disney side, because it's like, since Disney owns them.
Disney owns everything.
I know, it's true.
They own us, probably. Maybe we should be careful.
They probably do. They probably own at least one of my kidneys. So, but that is, like I said, they really get into some of the heavy mythology, and I'm kind of hoping to get a couple of the books to kind of delve into it a little bit, and hopefully we can come back later on and hopefully just really dig into some of the mythology. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that can be some homework for us later. I don't know if you have any time or not, but
yeah, I can probably make time, that's for sure.
Yeah, like I said,
or we'll have to talk about another Jim Henson movie or something.
Maybe I'll put Isaac down here and he can talk my head off. Who knows?
Oh Lord.
I know, God help us. So, but yeah, so that is just, I remember we've kind of wrapping up now, guys, but that's the synopsis and kind of our overall stuff on the Dark Crystal. I mean,
our crazy zigzag thoughts.
It's okay. That's welcome to our brains. This is what our spouses have to deal with on a daily basis. So it's okay though. So, but I mean, just to kind of sum it all up on my end, I truly thought this was one of my favorite childhood movies, and I still watch it periodically. Yes. I mean, at least maybe once a year if I get a chance. And I really hope, I don't know if your boys haven't watched it yet, have they?
They're not ready for that. Isaac probably would be. Paul does not like scary movies.
No, he's not. But he did really good with an anime movie I did the other day. Yeah. I remember that. I was really surprised. I was like, oh, wow, you did really good with that.
See, did I tell you what happened? Okay, so another movie.
Yeah.
My husband is really into... He's really into Ernest.
Yeah, I heard about this.
So we watched Ernest Scared Stupid, where he saves Halloween.
The
trolls. Well, Ernest has his dog, Rimshot. Well, he gets turned into a piece of wood at one point during the movie, a sculpture.
Yeah.
And my son started crying while watching this. And I was like, are you okay? And he's like, I know he's going to be turned back into a dog, but there's so many emotions. And he's crying. And he's like, but then he's happy. And that was a side of Isaac I had not seen yet. And I was not expecting it during Ernest Scared Stupid.
Hey, you know what?
He's very attached to the animals in movies, so we may not be ready for that yet.
Every good kid is, I think. So I mean, because I know I was always worried about that kind of stuff when I was little. You know, it's like, is the puppy gonna be fine?
Now, mind you, that like 17 children have been turned into wood statues before this, but Rimshot, that was the last straw.
Let's be fair. Some of those kids probably deserve it, or brats. So it is what it is. So. But yeah, so that's kind of that'll be a wrap up of our conversation, guys. Before we get going too long. Yeah, because you're tired, aren't you? Mm-hmm. Your sleepy time. Because I'm sure it's time to get going home here in a little bit. But guys, I just want to say thank you to Rachel. Wow, that's what shows whenever you have the same person on week after week, and then you throw a wrench into my gears there. So thank you to Rachel for showing up and just kind of enjoying this with me a little bit, because I just haven't had a chance to sit down with her and just have a conversation without Rugrats running around and just getting into everything. Because you try to have a conversation nowadays, and it's just like somebody just has to crawl up on your lap and want you to read a book or
dump out a bin of toys or something, and it
just never ends, nothing, guys. So
yeah,
if you guys don't have kids, enjoy your time while you have, but enjoy the kids if you do have them. So that's what I always say. But again, guys, thank you for stopping by. If you guys have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to put it on our Facebook page, or you can email us at seriouslypointlessconvo@gmail.com. Again, like I said, guys, we want your guys' feedback to know whether or not you guys are enjoying what we are doing. If we're messing up, if it sounds bad, if I'm burping too much, let me know. I need to know these things, because without that feedback, I'm never gonna get any better.
Such a newbie.
I know, I'm such a worm. We are worms, worthless worms.
Ooh, that might be a good Disney movie.
That would be a good Disney movie to go over. But anyways, guys, again, Rachel, thanks for showing up.
No problem.
Helping out. Ruth, thanks for keeping us going.
Oh, that was a fart.
Ooh, we got something cooking now. All right, guys, you guys have a wonderful day. Bye. If you're interested in keeping up to date with new episodes on our channel, add us on any of your favorite podcasting apps, or subscribe to our YouTube channel at Seriously Pointless Conversations. If you have questions or concerns, please email us at seriouslypointlessconvo@gmail.com. We appreciate any feedback. Thank you for listening to our show.